Yeah, we're going to kick it off with a question from Alex T. He says, at what point should I consider selling an accidental rental property? I'm making about 10% cash on cash, but it seems like a lot of work for $300 per month. So what do you have to say to Alex?
Well, one, Alex, I want you to know you're not alone. I'm not sure how you came into this accidental rental property. One of two things likely happened. Either you inherited a property that you did not previously purchase, and maybe it was already a rental property and there are tenants in there, so that's taking place. Or maybe two, you bought your first home and you decided that you wanted to move homes, but for some reason you could not sell, so you ended up buying the second home and turning your first home into a rental property. Either way, it doesn't sound like you're in a horrible situation. 10% cash on cash return is pretty strong when it comes to rental real estate. Even though you say $300 a month of free cash flow isn't all that attractive, I would imagine the reasons it's $300 is because there's some sort of debt still on the property. What I would think through, though, is the opportunity cost of capital. If I were to sell the rental property, if I were to not be using it in the way that I'm using it right now, is there somewhere else that I could go easily get a 10% rate of return? That's question number one you have to ask. Well, then question number two you have to ask is, okay, what's my time worth? What's my stress level worth? What is it worth for me to continue operating this thing? And we know this to be true. Money is nothing more than a tool that allows us to achieve the goals that we want to have. Well, if one of your goals is low stress and low maintenance and not having to worry about a bunch of different things and not having an asset that I have to think about all the different stuff that goes into it, well, if your goal is not to have that, then no one would suggest, oh, you have to keep it simply because it has a solid rate of return, even though I do think the solid rate of return should factor into the equation.
Yeah, I wrote down three quick things for Alex to kind of consider, and the first two are somewhat related to each other. First of all, let's talk about the risk of this, because good things can actually turn into bad situations if you're not careful. And what I mean by that, he said that this is specifically rental property. Mm-hmm. So I've dealt with rental property people my whole career when I was preparing taxes. Right now, he's getting cash flow from it, and he's even said he's got a 10% rate of return built on that from a cash flow perspective. But I'd be curious how much leverage is on this, how much debt there is that you're counting on the rent to cover that note every month, that if the tenant left, it would be a completely different situation if they left and an extended period of time that you couldn't put somebody in there. And that ties into the second point I wrote down is, where are you specifically, Alex, in your financial order of operations? We love real estate investing and being a part of it, but you got to make sure you have your financial foundation underneath you. That's why you want to make sure you've completed steps 1 through 7 in the financial order of operations, because real estate is more of an abundance goal in step 8. So I'd ask, where are you? And then what's the why? And I think this is really the crux of your question, is that you've got good things going on with it, but when you look at your life and what you're actually, the aptitudes after you've gone through the financial order of operations. By the way, if you want yours, you can go to moneyguy.com/resources, download it for free. But does this fit into like how you want to use your time? Because I've shared with you guys, I grew up in a household where both my father and my brother were very handy. Mm-hmm. They could fix anything, the cars they drove, anything in the house broke down. I'm not as gifted in that, or I've not leaned into that aptitude. So it just, things breaking down on rental properties, I usually have to hire somebody for. If the hassle factor, by your own words, $300 a month, this seems like a lot of work. I would listen to that voice, but you got to make sure you do the 360 analysis to say, okay, is it not only the cash flow, how much is this property appreciated? What are going to be the tax impacts? But then after you kind of gather all the inventory of all the decision points that you might have financially, then you can figure out, let's see if there's a path out if this doesn't check all the boxes for where I want to be in the long term.
Yeah, you just said something right there. I think understanding the tax impacts of the transaction is going to be huge, because if this was a property that you inherited, you want to make sure that the appropriate step up in basis was accounted for. If you do sell it and this was your primary residence, are you still inside that window where you could get a tax-free exclusion on gain up to
2 out of the last 5 years.
if you were in the house for 2 out of the last 5 years. You want to know those going into it. So, because when you sell the house, it might be subject to capital gains. If you've been depreciating it, it might be subject to depreciation recapture. So you want to make sure you understand those things going into the sales transaction, because again, that will affect the math in terms of what makes the most sense with this particular asset.